Hello and welcome back to Liberty Nation's LNTV. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Now today we're joined by Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Liberty Nation's Legal Affairs Editor. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mark.
And we are talking about the Justice in Policing Act 2020, recently unveiled by Nancy Pelosi to much fanfare. Scott, what are the major provisions of this Justice in Policing Act?
Mark, the changes in the law that I think are the biggest are changes to qualified immunity, also changes to federal civil rights, criminal protections that the people have against the police. And there are a ton of changes with respect to data collection and reporting, and a lot of funding in that area, and funding for community groups. There's a lot of money. It's $1 billion bill. And then there are also one major change with respect to how federal police officers conduct searches in drug cases.
You mentioned the qualified immunity doctrine here. Could you explain a little bit about that and how that's going to be impacted by this bill if it passes?
So qualified immunity is a court-made doctrine that gave police officers the ability to avoid, and police departments, the availability to avoid civil liability for committing a wrong. So if a police officer harms you inappropriately, you can take them to court under numerous federal and state laws and sue for damages. Qualified immunity says you don't get to win that case unless the police officer knew or should have known, basically, that what they did was against the rules. The problem is that that grant of immunity became so broad that unless there was a case almost directly on point for what the alleged violation was, a person couldn't recover. So we have a situation in the United States where police officers often do commit civil wrongs against people. They treat them inappropriately in violation of their rights, but then those people cannot recover in court. And so it's an important change. I think it's a good change, Mark. Also, I think that it will not yield much in the way of results because it's backward looking. First, you have to have the violation, and then you can recover for the violation in certain cases. So I think it's a positive change again, but in terms of what change it will result in, I think it's relatively minimal.
So we have the qualified immunity, we have the no-knock warrants, which I believe affects drug cases, federal drug cases.
So the no-knock warrant prohibition affects only when federal law enforcement apply to federal courts for no-knock warrants in drug cases. And the knock and announce requirement is part of our law. So if a police officer has a warrant to serve on a property looking for evidence, they have to go to the property, they knock, and they loudly say, police officer search warrant. You've probably seen it on TV a million times. Well, with the advent of the drug war in the United States, the popularity of no-knock warrants grew and grew. And a no-knock warrant basically says they can go in at any time. And you see these sort of like the famous cop-style dynamic entry raids. And the problem, of course, is the people who are inside of those buildings and residences often think that not that they're being searched by the police, but that they're being invaded. And that's what happened in the Breonna Taylor case, as we understand it. So those at the federal level will be eliminated.
Could you give us a couple of ideas on what you would include to create positive change in this area?
The federal government can't change the way local police officers work in most instances because they work under state law. Most of these changes come about through carrot and the stick with respect to federal funding, because in order to get the police departments to change, you say, in order to be eligible for these funds or grants, you should make these following changes. So what they could have done, Mark, is say that in order to be eligible for these grants, then the local police or the state police would also have to issue no-knock warrants in drug cases, for instance, but they haven't asked for that. So that would be an additional measure that could be added. They could also say that federal agents, and by and large we're talking about the DEA now with respect to drugs, cannot participate in cases where local police have used or intend to use no-knock warrants. So in other words, they could put a lot more pressure on where the violations really are in that area at the state and local level for these warrant issuing.
Scott, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
And thanks to you at home.
Go deeper on the topic discussed in this video, head on over to one of these links here or go to our Liberty Nation Roku channel. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for Liberty.